Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about the nerves and the ganglion of the spinal cord. So let's not waste any of your time. Let's get right to it. Now, when we're talking about the structure of a nerve and leading into the ganglion, let's talk about first what we're talking about. So, when we're talking nerve, okay, if you're looking at the diagram beside me there, and again, some of those words are fairly small, but this picture is in your PowerPoint. You can certainly pull it up to see the words displayed bigger. It's also in the textbook as well. Maybe just went over them to that page while we're talking about this so you can see it in a more clear manner. But the entire, if we start our way to the end, the open end, the cross section end, and all that yellow leading up to where it splits as a Y, if you follow that, in between the split and the end here, that's a nerve. Okay, that's considered a nerve, and we're going to talk about each of the other areas. This picture is a little bit bigger than the one that's going to be on the next screen when I start talking about the names. So I just want to point them out where you are. But when I talk about the fascicle, that's here on the left-hand side. That bracket, that word beside that is fascicle, and then over to the far right is the word lost my train. Epineurum, paraneurum, and the endoneurum. Those are the coverings, but they're on the far right hand side. The epineurum and the paraneurum, they're right there. They're the top on the right hand side, the first two. And then the endoneurum is 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth one down. But these are the coverings, and they're gonna separate different things, and we're going to talk about those. But I wanted to point out where the words are now because the next picture is a little bit smaller. And here is that picture that I referred to. But when we're talking about these coverings and these different words, let's first start with fascicle. Remember, the entire thing is a nerve, so all that stuff in there would be considered one nerve. Now, the fascicle is the individual sections. So you can see the word fascicle. It's on the left-hand side by that bracket, and it's bracketing in that all those little blue things, and there's some yellow in there as well. But that would be a fascicle. So if you're looking at this diagram, there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fascicles in there. And of course, the red and blue, I'm assuming that you would understand that those are capillaries, arteries, veins coming in and out. The red obviously is the oxygenated blood, and the blue is the non-oxygenated blood, meaning it's the one going out, and the red would be coming in. Okay, so that's the fascicles, and they are covered by the paraneurum. The paraneurum is what covers the fascicles. The epineurum is what covers the entire thing. It's like that yellow on the nerve fiber. That's epineurum. And then the kind of the whitish around the fascicle, that's the paraneurum. And then if you look at the far bottom on the right hand side, there's one fascicle that's kind of pulled out, and then there's a little yellow thing pulled out. That would be a nerve fiber, and those nerve fibers are covered by endoneurum. So the endoneurum covers one individual fiber, okay, and then there's a bunch of nerve fibers inside of a fascicle, which is covered by the paraneurum, and then all the fascicles grouped together are covered by the epineurum. So that's kind of the breakdown of the coverings. All right, so this screen here is all review, but just wanted to remind you of these words from nervous tissue. But the idea of sensory or afferent, these are nerves that are taking the signal away from the sensory receptors. That afferent we talked in the nervous tissue last chapter, meaning away, whereas the motor, okay, the word motor means it's coming down from the brain and out to wherever it needs to go. It's going to cause some action or something to happen, and that's the efferent nerves. So remember sensory and motor, afferent and efferent. Remember those nerves. And then the mixed nerves. And if you think about mixed nerves, you think about in a nerve itself, it's going to have the posterior root information, which is what's coming out to the. Wait, I'm thinking about that. No, that's coming. That's got the sensory information, and in the anterior root, it's got the motor, the information. So part of the way through the nerve, it's got both, and that's what references the mixed signal. Remember, we talked last chapter that mixed doesn't mean that one nerve fiber can do both. It means that within a nerve, there are both the information going to the brain, both the information coming from the brain. And this diagram here, again, is just a reference, just a review. It's all the things that I just said. So if you think that you've got this information written down in a fairly good manner, then feel free to move on from this. If you do not, you may want to pause here and collect this information. And again, whether you have written it down, collect yourself a picture, whatever, either way is fine. You've already written it down in chapter 12. But again, do what you need to do to make sure you capture this. All right, now to the ganglion. Ganglion is plural, ganglia. It would be singular. But remember, this is the peripheral nervous system, meaning we have left the spinal cord. And the ganglia simply refers to, if you look at the picture, the diagram beside me, you look at the picture to the top, where the nerve fiber splits into the anterior and posterior roots, those are the ganglions. Okay. Now, and then if we just talked about one, we talked about the posterior or the anterior, that'd be ganglia, singular. But the ganglion is those two together, and so essentially it's before or after the split, depending on what direction you're coming from. If you're coming from the sensory receptor, you go through the nerve fiber, and then it splits into the two, and that's the ganglion. If you're coming from the spinal cord, it'd be before the Y, and then they would come together for the nerve fiber. Remember, the posterior, the information is going out to the sensory receptor. The anterior, it's coming into the spinal cord. Oh, it's got the word neurosomas on there. I had a note to talk about that. We talked about this in chapter 12 as well, just a reminder what that word means. The neurosomas is simply a combination of two words, neurons and the somas, or cell body, and it's just a reference to the cell body of the neurons, the soma area, which is what the dendrites are attached to send that information. And then we reference neurosomas to remind us, not to remind us, but to tell us that for the different ganglions, they're located in different areas. For the posterior root, their neurosomas are located within the ganglion itself. In other words, if you're looking at it in a two-dimensional, it's going to be that top one, but it's really, they're really side by side. So it's the posterior, it's the one in the back. If you were, excuse me, and then the neurosomas for the anterior are located in the gray matter, that anterior horn of the butterfly effect, the gray matter. So that's our video over nerves structure in ganglion. When we come back to the next time, we're going to be talking about pathways that spinal nerves take. We'll see you then.